Yo, what is good, everybody? Welcome into the Free Money Podcast here, coming to you live with the NHL Stanley Cup Playoffs Preview Edition 2023. I'm going to do a quick recap and a rundown of all the series. We got 8 of them, 4 in the East, 4 in the West, and going to give some props and what I would play, and then some leans as well, kind of offer some info on all the teams. So to start, let's start with the East and the New Jersey Devils and the New York Rangers. The best series price I could find for the Devils was on Barstool, and it currently sits at minus 109, and the Rangers on FanDuel plus 105. The Devils are 3-1 in the season series versus the Rangers, and both goalies, Vitek Vanacek and Igor Shesterkin, played all 4 games. Igor, though, I think is the better goalie and has far more playoff experience. 10-9 playoff record, because we're not going to count that COVID season. That's just a little silly with nobody in the stands. And against a team similar to New Jersey, who plays quick and kind of speed, youthfulness, Carolina, Igor came to play in that playoff series last year, .949 save percentage and a 1.72 goals against average. And he was pretty hyped up. I mean, that is a factor of being in the New York media, but I think it is warranted for Igor. The kid is legit and has that playoff experience, especially last year's run where they were kind of a year ahead of where they were. So I think this year is a year for them to kind of fulfill that and not only get to the Eastern Conference Finals, but the thought is, I think, in that locker room is to get there. Now, like Carolina plays that kind of quick and loaded on youth and skill players. This is a perfect match for Igor in New Jersey. Not only Igor, but the defensemen. They handled Carolina very well in that series, even though it did go 7 games. Just the Rangers have far more playoff experience here. And not only that, they added Victor Tarasenko from St. Louis in the trade right before the trade deadline, and then Patrick Big Daddy Kane right before the trade deadline. You add those 2 guys. Patrick Kane has a couple Stanley Cups. Tarasenko has one himself. They'll help the forwards. And then my boy Adam Fox, who I think is going to crush the Devils in this playoff series, and I have a play for him coming up a little bit later. But Kane and Tarasenko, those 2 alone have almost more playoff experience than the entire Devils roster. Dougie Hamilton and Eric Haula kind of lead the way in that department, and those 2 guys are not their best players. So it's going to be interesting to kind of see how the Rangers start the series. I have the Rangers start the series 2-0. It's just going to be a gentleman's sweep kind of coming in from the Rangers. But if not, I think the Rangers will outlast them with the playoff experience. Keandre Miller also stepped up this year, had a great season. And the Devils were just middle of the road on the power play, 13th best in the NHL, 21.9%, but had a phenomenal PK, 82.6%, which is 4th best in the NHL. The Rangers had a very good power play, top 10, 7th best, 24.1%, and then the PK, 81.2%. Chris Kreider is the guy who eats on the power play, so I think that he will kind of stand out there in that department. And then just the Rangers have the edge in goalie experience, and I think that makes the difference here in the playoffs, especially against a team like the Devils. Vitek Vanacek had his time with Washington, him and Samsonov. Neither one of them are on the team anymore. As a Devils fan, that can't really be the greatest ringing endorsement, and I think they know that. I just think that the playoff price is the way that it is because of the home ice advantage for the Devils. But I think the play here is New York Rangers series price plus 105. And then the other play I have, we're going to go head-to-head player props. This is over on DraftKings. Adam Fox minus 115 versus Dougie Hamilton. Adam Fox had a breakout in the playoffs last year. That series against Carolina, that alone just showed me that he is the real deal come playoff time. Adam Fox had 5 goals, 18 assists last postseason. I think he gets a chunk of those against the Devils here. And Dougie Hamilton was great with Boston, hasn't done much since. I think that Adam Fox minus 115, more points versus Dougie Hamilton is the way to go. So 2 plays in the Rangers series. Shifting over to Carolina and the New York Islanders, this is going to be my favorite play of the postseason, one that I don't think is accurately priced at all. On Barstool, best price I could find, Carolina minus 186, and plus 165 is pretty much everywhere. FanDuel, DraftKings, MGM, you name it. This is just what the NHL playoffs are all about to a T. This is a team that struggled mightily for about 3/4 of the season and then turned it on right at the right time. When their backs were against the wall, they did what they needed to do. And this was just on the back of Igor Shesterkin. The Isles, though, won 3 out of the last 4 to secure a playoff spot. And on paper, face a better team. But that's not what these playoffs are all about. Whether it's the NBA or NHL, it's all going to be the same. It's what team is the hottest at the moment. I think Sorokin is the best goalie in the NHL. Not only is he the best, but he's led the league in shutouts, tied for the lead in shutouts, that is, and third best save percentage. He surprisingly, though, doesn't have the best stats against Carolina. 2-4 in his career, 2.88 goals against, and a 9.08 save percentage. And he did win at Carolina, though, this season. So they won 2-1. And that's just kind of how they like to play. They play that slow, methodical style. And Sorokin, 4-1 in the playoffs when the Isles went on that big run 2 years ago and lost to Tampa Bay. But he did help them beat the higher-seeded Penguins in the first round. That was back when Semyon Varlamov was goalie number 1. He has now taken that and is the guy in New York. This is just how the team needs to be for him to win. Play that slow, methodical style, play on the counterattack, crush on the penalty kill, because if they allow goals, if they get down 2 or 3, they are not a team equipped to come back from that. They know this. But that is how they love to play. That's just the Isles. Anyone that watches the Isles, people can complain all they want, but this team is gritty. They play hard. And Carolina is missing 2 of their big players. Max Pacioretty only played about a couple games early in the season and is out for the entire rest of the season. Missed a good chunk. And Andrei Svechnikov. If those 2 were playing, Islanders probably don't have a chance, but they're not. And here we are, and I think the Isles can definitely take advantage. Carolina last season beat Boston in 7 games and then lost in 7 games to the aforementioned New York Rangers. And Frederik Andersen missed the 2022 playoffs, so they had to rely on Antti Ranta and Pyotr Svechnikov, or Kyotakov. And Frederik Andersen has plenty of playoff experience, 27 wins, 23 losses, spent time with Anaheim and Toronto in the playoffs, has a .916 save percentage and 2.55 goals against. I don't think that he's the greatest goalie. I think this is where the Isles have to take advantage, is in the goalie department. And they definitely have the capability to do that. He only has one lone series win, and that was in the 2014-2015 season with Anaheim. In his time in Toronto, he didn't win any. Carolina, like I mentioned, won the season series 3-1, but the Isles have gotten a little bit better since then. They made a trade deadline move, trading for Bo Horvat and giving up Anthony Beauvillier. And the Isles also have that grinder fourth line. They have Casey Cizikas, Matt Martin, Cal Clutterbuck, who will make a big impact, honestly. Anyone that watches the Isles games or pretty much any Eastern Conference hockey knows that playing them is not fun. It's always going to be a grind, whether it's the first line getting after it or the fourth line battling out with them. The Isles usually make them work for it on that fourth line, and they just play a little bit different from Carolina. Carolina plays that kind of finesse. They have a lot of passing. They traded for Shane Gostisbehere from the Coyotes. It's a great offensive defenseman. They like to play that offensive style, and then hopefully Andersen doesn't let in too many on the back end, and they can come out on top. But that pales in comparison to how the Islanders like to play. Carolina's not the greatest power play percentage either. 20th best, and really the only team that's really worse than them in that department is the Islanders in Winnipeg, but the Islanders don't need that to win, as they have shown that from where they are in the standings. This just proves more that Sorokin is their team. Ilya Sorokin is the New York Islanders. Brock Nelson will play great. Zach Parise will play great, I'm sure. Bo Horvat gets a chance to kind of play better than he did with Vancouver in the playoffs, but the Isles have the 9th best penalty kill, and that is something that Carolina just thrives on, taking advantage of your mistakes. The Isles don't make many. So I think my favorite play of the postseason is the New York Islanders plus 165 series price. And then every day that these games are going on, I would look for Brent Burns' shots on goal. He did that in San Jose. He did that last postseason. Doesn't score that many. He does okay for himself, but nothing spectacular. and that is going to be something to look for that you all can look for in the playoff series and the playoff props daily. The third series, Tampa Bay Lightning and Toronto Maple Leafs. This is going to be an interesting one. I'll just start. Toronto may be the biggest disappointment going in hockey. I think the fans in Canada know that. They're the own Toronto fans or the Canada hockey fans who say we're better at the sport, yada, yada, yada. Everybody knows that Toronto is just a letdown. They just always have these great teams, whether it's Austin Matthews, when they had Phil Kessel, Nazem Kadri, the list goes on and on. They just can't get it done. They haven't won a playoff series since 2004. They now have Mitch Marner. They signed John Tavares from the Isles. Just Tampa Bay Lightning have the far more experienced team for the playoffs. These guys have now, a lot of them have done 3 runs in the postseason, which can likely equate to about 3/4 of a season or maybe even a full season. So the miles are kind of stacking on these guys. But in this case, in the first round, against a team who is, I think, outmanned, a little bit soft, to be honest, compared to the Tampa Bay Lightning, who have guys like Patrick Maroon and who would just give you the business. It's not a great look for Toronto, and the series price, again, I think is only priced this way because they have home ice advantage. The same exact thing happened last year. Tampa Bay took them in 7 and advanced all the way to the Stanley Cup Finals. But Tampa Bay is without midseason trade acquisition Tanner Janot, and that might hurt them a little bit. That's kind of a guy that they've relied on to kind of provide some youth to the team, as a lot of these guys are getting older. Stamkos, Kucherov, Victor Hedman, a lot of these guys are getting older. He was supposed to help out, so they will be without him for some early games in the postseason. Toronto did win the season series 2-1, but 2 of those games were by 1. So these teams are pretty evenly matched. I just think that it's going to come to the playoff experience out on the ice. Toronto was stellar at home, 27 wins, 8 regulation losses, and 6 overtime losses. Tampa Bay, not so great on the road, 18, 22-1. And Ilya Samsonov is 1-3 in the playoffs. That is his record when he was with Washington, losing to Florida last season. And in 3 of those 5 games that he played, gave up 3 goals. And a team like Tampa Bay is going to take advantage of that. This is the playoffs. This is no longer the regular season. Things get turned up a little bit. These guys get ready to go. And his counterpart, Vasilevsky, is who many view as the number 1 goalie to some. And that is probably warranted in some cases. I just think this season, like I mentioned, I give it to Sorokin. But in the playoffs, he does have 2 Stanley Cups and 1 Stanley Cup loss last season. 63-38 in playoff record. And in the past 3 seasons, he's only lost back-to-back games twice. That was to the Colorado Avalanche last year, and back in 2021 to the Rangers. So it's just going to be exciting for this year. This year is going to be crazy because you're going to have the team with so much expectations and a team that hasn't really had much this year. They've been kind of looked at, kind of struggling, meddling through much of the year, and now get their chance to put their foot on the necks of Toronto. I just expect Victor Hedman to be a difference maker here yet again. He had 7 points in their series last year, and I think that he will have something similar this year. The best price for Tampa Bay is plus 130 on DraftKings, and for Toronto is minus 148 over on Barstool. Now, this was a tough one, the Boston and Florida series. Boston is minus 300 on MGM. That is the best price. And Florida on Barstool is plus 270. Pretty good price if you think the Panthers can be pesky and give them some trouble, as they did split the season series 2-2. But the home team won all 4 games, so which would have to force Florida to win one on the road here. But Boston set the record for most points in a season this year, and they are led by David Pastrnak, who had his best season by far. 113 points on the season, 61 goals. The kid was incredible. It felt like almost every night you would just hear him score goals. And they are led in goalie by Linus Ullmark, tied for the league in wins and a 1.89 goals against average. Not only that, they also have playoff experience in spades. David Krejci, Brad Marchand, Pastrnak, Taylor Hall. I mean, the list goes on and on with these guys. And they are pretty much everyone's favorite right now to win the Stanley Cup. So it's going to be interesting. This Florida team having to travel down to Florida. And The Panthers are always in high-scoring games, 3.51 goals for and 3.32 goals against. I honestly don't have much of a read on this series. I would just expect the overs to hit in all these games. I know Ullmark had a 1.89 goals against. He just doesn't have much playoff experience. And this is a Florida team that has some, not as much as Boston, but they definitely have some. So they are just severely understaffed in that department. And the Panthers traded Jonathan Huberdeau, longtime franchise player Jonathan Huberdeau, for Matthew Tkachuk to kind of help provide something a little bit different that Huberdeau didn't have, a little more physicality. And it's just, like I said, I have no read on this. Florida narrowly edged Buffalo and Pitt to make it in. And to end the season, Florida won 6 in a row before losing the last 2. With the series price this high, I just don't see much value. But I do have 4 picks for the Eastern Conference first round. New York Rangers plus 105 on FanDuel. Head-to-head points, Adam Fox minus 115 versus Dougie Hamilton on DraftKings. New York Islanders plus 165 on FanDuel. And Tampa Bay Lightning plus 130 on DraftKings. Those are the 4 plays for the Eastern Conference. Now let's head over to the Western. So the Western playoffs start with the first round of Vegas and Winnipeg. Now the best price I could find for Vegas was minus 166 at FanDuel and the Winnipeg Jets plus 145 over at BetMGM. Golden Knights won the season series between these two 3-0. Now the Kings, they made a trade deadline move, a big splash, kind of one that I don't think many people saw coming, to acquire Jonathan Quick to bolster the goalie room. Something that they've kind of eluded them, even though they had Marc-Andre Fleury the past couple seasons. However, Laurent Brossoit has not lost a game in regulation, but has 3 overtime losses, and I think he looks like he's going to get the nod as the number 1 goalie for the Knights. So kind of a interesting goalie room that Vegas Knights have, and Bruce Cassidy definitely has a decision to make, and I do think it's Brossoit with 2.17 goals against average. However, if things get close, I would expect Quick to be the starting goalie and relied upon for playoff experience. And Vegas also acquired Jack Eichel in the offseason, and he has yet to play a game in the postseason. So it's going to be interesting for him. I think that he might press a little bit. I know he's a lot of expectations, especially from his time at Buffalo. They never made the playoffs in his tenure with them, but this Vegas team looks like the second best team in hockey, right there behind the Boston Bruins. And they faced Connor Hellebuck, who had a top 5 save percentage and carried these Jets into the playoffs. Vegas played Winnipeg in 2018, and he did get swept in that series, but played okay. Allowed 3 goals 3 times and 2 once, so nothing crazy, but a little more play of experience since then, and maybe that helps him. Who knows? I just think the Jets play a great team hockey. Not many stars, not many casual fans know many of their players, so it's going to be a unique series for them. Has to play team hockey to do so against the star power of the Vegas Knights. Mark Stone's probably coming back as well. I've seen he's been out on the ice a little bit, running around, skating around. So it's going to be interesting to see how much run he gets in these playoffs. And I just think they give Vegas a little bit of trouble. Winnipeg plays kind of smart hockey, doesn't make many mistakes. That's kind of how they thrive. And Vegas just has yet to get over the Western Conference Finals since that initial run that they had back in 2018. So I just think the price for plus 2.5 is too high on the Winnipeg Jets, as well as the over 5.5. So I think Kyle Connor is the prop that I'm going to play. In 2019 playoffs, Kyle Connor had series of 3, 6, 2, and 5. That 2 points came against Vegas, but I expect that to change. And his opponent and the prop that I like the best, Kyle Connor, even money, head-to-head points against Jack Eichel. Like I mentioned, I think Jack Eichel just kind of struggles coming out of the gate. Kyle Connor's been there. He is the leader of this team. He is the highest point total man on this team, and he will use that to his advantage in this postseason. Now, series number 2, Seattle and the Colorado Avalanche. The best price I could find Seattle at was plus 230 over on Barstool, and then Colorado Avalanche best price minus 245 on FanDuel. I don't think this series price is really accurate at all. Seattle won the season series 2-1, albeit by one both times, but this team has expectations so low, it's almost a little disrespectful, and these guys know what the odds are. They know going into every playoff series, almost every game, every night, every big game at least, they know what is happening and what these series odds are. So it's just a little bit disrespectful. Cal Makar is out for Colorado, and he is the best defenseman in the league, along with their captain, Gabriel Landeskog, who has been announced that he's out. Kraken have a few injuries of their own. They are without Andrei Burakovsky. Daniel Sprong is listed as day-to-day, so not sure if he makes it for Game 1. Avalanche have the goalie advantage for sure. Alexander Georgiev, the advanced stats show that too. 21.9 goals saved above expected, and this will be the deciding factor in the series. But Seattle lacks in that area. Not sure who they're going to go with. Grubauer, Martin Jones, both kind of slightly above average guys. That might even be a little bit of a stretch. It's quite crazy how Seattle has made it without having a top goalie like that. Because a lot of the other teams, you look down the list in the West alone, other than the Oilers, really, I would say they have a guy that's kind of just getting by. Korpisalo's done well. He came over from Columbus. We'll talk about him a little bit later. So it's quite unique that Seattle is in this position, and that kind of speaks to how good they play. And if they can overperform, the Kraken have a legit shot from the goalie room. Jones and Grubauer just have to match Georgiev, and I think that Seattle can get the job done. Pavel Francouz started 2 games against Seattle and went 1-1, and Georgiev lost his only game against Seattle, giving up 3 in an overtime loss. The Kraken spread the wealth on scoring goals. They had 6 20-goal scorers, and the firepower is there, along with 5 guys that had 30 assists or more. The Kraken do struggle on the power play, though, and sometimes those razor-thin margins can be the difference in a win or a loss. 21st best power play, 19.8%, and the penalty kill, not bad, 76.7%. Colorado, though, far better on the power play, 24.5%, and then similar to Seattle on the PK. And they just have the significant playoff experience coming off of that Stanley Cup run going for them, the reigning defending Stanley Cup champions. They have lost a couple guys from that run, as aforementioned, Makar, Landeskog, Nazem Kadri. So it's going to be a different team and a little bit different run for these guys. An underrated aspect for this series, I think, is going to be the ice and the fans for Seattle. I will give them credit for being West Coast fans. They do pretty well. I think most people would agree with that. So that's going to be a nice little added bonus for Seattle. And they can make a difference, especially if it gets to a 2-1 series lead and Seattle can close it out in Game 6 or even Game 5. You never know what happens in that one. So I have 2 plays for the Seattle series. I have 1 unit on Seattle plus 1.5 minus 110, and then a half unit on Seattle plus 230. I really think this Kraken team has legs, and I think this is the best matchup for them, quite honestly. I think the Kings match their offense well. Not that Colorado doesn't, but just that is the Kings' bread and butter is the offense. Colorado, like I mentioned, kind of has Georgiev, so they play a little more balanced. And Edmonton and Vegas, they lost Vegas when they needed to win to possibly get home ice. Couldn't do it. But I think this is the best matchup for Seattle. So I think it's definitely worth a shot on that plus 230. Shifting over to Edmonton and the Kings. The best price I found for Edmonton, minus 225 at BetMGM. And the Kings, plus 200 on DraftKings. The Oilers beat these Kings in 6 games last year, but the Kings have retooled a little bit, switched it up after this series loss last season. They acquired Kevin Fiala in the offseason for a first-round draft pick from the Wild. And at the trade deadline, kind of shook everybody, I would say Kings fans along with hockey fans in general. They traded Jonathan Quick to Columbus, who was flipped to Vegas. But in that deal back, the LA Kings got Joonas Korpisalo, along with defenseman Gavrikov. So these two split the season series, but the Oilers won both post-Quick removal. So a nice little wrinkle to that. The Oilers were on a run. They were en fuego to finish the season. Won 16 of their last 19, including 9 straight to end the season. And the Oilers are, simply put, just in their prime right now. Connor McDavid and Leon Draisaitl, quite the duo. It kind of reminds me of just Taves and Kane back in the day. Just they would always find each other. They'd always get the job done. And then you add in Ryan Nugent-Hopkins, Evander Kane. So they also have some great pieces. Zach Hyman. This team is legit. They can definitely make a run here. And the Oilers themselves made some trade deadline moves, adding Nick Bjugstad from Arizona, a nice little third-line centerpiece, 13 goals with Arizona, 4 since joining the Oilers, and Matthias Ekholm to the defenseman, that second defenseman pairing. But I think trading Quick may have been a smart move here for LA. Quick had kind of lost a step, and he's shown it in some games with the Knights so far this season. And Korpisalo did well with Columbus, surprisingly. Went 2-0 against Edmonton on a worse team, but lost once with the Kings. So not quite sure how this series goes. I think it's pretty even. Not a shocker. I would just bet every over in this game. You will definitely be up by the end of the series, especially if it goes 7 games. Guaranteed you'll be plus money if you take the overs. The Oilers have the number 1 power play in the league. 32.4% is wild. And the Kings right behind them, 4th best, 25.3%. Neither of them are really good at the penalty kill either, which is going to make this explosive for sure. The Oilers 20th, the Kings 24th. Now, Stuart Skinner, the goalie for Edmonton, didn't get any playoff run last year. Mike Smith was in net. So this is his first career playoff appearance coming up here. And it may be a hindrance for Edmonton and maybe a slow start. I'm not quite sure how he's going to play. So I have 2 kind of props to play for this series. Total goals in this series over 37.5 as is minus 125 over on DraftKings. I think every game probably gets to 6 at the minimum. Korpisalo is a good goalie, but in the playoffs with Columbus, he did okay. So nothing crazy, nothing bad, but there's going to be a lot of goals, a lot of light in the lamp here. And then the second one I like, Zach Hyman, 3 goals or more, plus 138 over on FanDuel. Hyman, in the playoff series last year against Calgary, had 6 goals, and he scored every game that series, and then had 2 goals versus Vegas. So he'll definitely get near it, and I think he has a lot of potential to hit it, especially against Korpisalo, who hasn't had that much playoff experience, and is definitely worth the play here for us. Now, this last one, I didn't have much of a read, to be honest. This Dallas-Minnesota series, I think, is 2 teams that are pretty evenly matched, and I think the price reflects that. But the best price to get Dallas on FanDuel is minus 138, and then for Minnesota, plus 125 on DraftKings. Kirill Kaprizov finished up the last couple of games, returned back from an injury that missed about a week, 2 weeks, and he's played pretty well against the Stars in his career, 12 points in 8 games. But Jake Ottinger is going to have to carry Dallas here. Ottinger is 4-0-1 versus the Wild in his career, so very promising for Stars fans. But something interesting, they're underdogs game 1 at home, so quite confusing. All the wires are crossed for me on this one. I have no read whatsoever. The Wild start the postseason without Joel Eriksson-Ek, their center. Nice center, a guy that grinds, should probably be on a 4th line, but has the skill of a 2nd-line guy. And they lost in 6 to St. Louis last year, but didn't have Philip Gustafsson then. Philip Gustafsson had a great goals against average this season, and he was 1-1 against the Stars. I would expect a lot of goals in this series, maybe total goals under, but I was like, you know what, who knows with how Minnesota teams do in the postseason, as you all saw probably tonight with the Minnesota Timberwolves loss. So who knows? Jason Robertson had a breakout season for the Stars and one to watch along with Rube Hintz. But Robertson had 109 points, 46 goals, 63 assists, which is pretty bananas. And not to mention Jamie Benn, Tyler Seguin. Those guys will definitely look to help out as well. And the Stars also had a first-round exit last season, losing to Calgary. So these 2 teams are like looking in a mirror to me. Good goalies, young talent, a couple of veterans mixed in there as well. Like the Wild got Matt Zuccarello. I'm not sure if he's going to play. Not sure if he's going to miss a game or 2. So these 2 teams are so even. I have no play, and I'll probably just wait till the next round to assess. But the 3 plays for the West, I have Kyle Connor, even money versus Jack Eichel, more points on DraftKings. And the 2 plays for the Seattle series, Seattle plus 1.5, minus 110 for 1 unit, and Seattle plus 230 for half a unit. And then for the Edmonton LA Kings series, we have 2 as well. Edmonton LA Kings over 37.5 total goals, minus 125. And then on FanDuel, Zach Hyman, 3 goals or more, plus 138. I think he can hit that, and he can hit that fairly soon. So would love to cash that as well. And then a quick recap of the East picks for the New York Rangers series on FanDuel. Plus 105 series price, New York Rangers. In head-to-head points, Adam Fox, minus 115 versus Dougie Hamilton on DraftKings. Pick number 2, my favorite, New York Islanders, plus 165. You can get that pretty much anywhere right now. I think that's a slam dunk, but nothing really ever is, so that's just my kind of how I view the Islanders series. And then pick number 3, Tampa Bay Lightning plus 130 on DraftKings for the series price. Until Toronto beats somebody, you got to prove it to me, and I don't think that this team is capable of that. So those are the picks. Thank you all for listening. See you next time.